بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Continuing our weekly journey with regard to fiqh, and we are currently discussing the topic of cleanliness. In today's discussion, we talk about istinja. Now, before that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah At-Tawbah, verse 108, that فيه رجال يحبون أن يتطهروا والله يحب المطهرين, that there are men who love purify themselves, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who are clean and pure. And then وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم is also reported to have said, استنزهوا من البول, that distance yourself from urine or droplets of urine, فإن عامة عذاب القبر منه, for indeed majority of the punishments of the grave are due to this. Now, it is very important that when a person goes to the toilet, to ensure that they are protected, or rather they distance themselves from the splashes of urine. That is why in one of our previous discussions we had mentioned that a person should avoid standing and urinating or using a urinal, because when they do so, then the urine would splash back onto a person's clothing. Sometimes a person may not even be aware of this. So to be very, very careful with regard to the splashing and droplets of urine, that it should not affect our clothes. For indeed, if it does so, and if it is of a certain amount, it could compromise our salah. Furthermore, the scholars explain that the most common term we know is istinja, but before istinja, they say that yalzamul istibra qabla al istinja. This concept of istibra, which we will discuss shortly, is actually binding upon an individual even before having to make istinja. So a person relieves themselves before making istinja, istibra, it is necessary that istibra be made. Now, what is istibra? The scholarly definition is هو إخراج ما بقي في المحل من بول أو غائط حتى يغلب على ظنه أنه لم يبق في المحل شيء. That istibra is to remove that which remains in either the front or back passage after urinating or passing stool respectively, to the extent that a person becomes satisfied that no traces or impurity from the front or back passage is left. And وَمَنْ اعْتَادَ فِي ذَلِكَ شَيْئًا, a person who can make this a habit, فَلْيَفْعَلْهُ, then he should do so, كقيام أو مشي أو ركض برجله وتنحنح أو غير ذلك. There are different ways to achieve this. A person after urinating, a person can place some tissue over the private organ. A person can then stand and sit back down, just to ensure that whatever is in the passageway, in the passage in the urine passage, that comes out, so nothing leaks out at a later stage. Or a person can take a few steps, or a person could lean towards one side while seated on the toilet, or a person should try and cough, for instance, make themselves cough just once or twice, to ensure that whatever urine is within the passage, the front passage, that all comes out onto the tissue, the toilet paper. And then after that, a person, once is satisfied that nothing is within the front or back passage or pathways, then a person can engage in what we call istinja. And istinja is simply to wash the private part with water. Now, when it comes to istinja, the scholars mention that if a certain amount of impurity, certain amount of urine has come out, or a certain amount of stool has come out, then it becomes fard and necessary for a person to wash the private part. And if it is just very, very little, like maybe one or two drops of urine, a person went to the toilet and they tried, and maybe one or two drops of urine only came out. It wasn't a significant amount. It was just one or two small drops. Then istinja in that case becomes sunnah. Then we move on to discuss whether a person should be using water or toilet paper or stone, or how exactly should it be done. Now, when we talk about the companions of Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, and Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam himself using al-hajar, a stone, to wash, or rather to cleanse the private organs, then obviously to understand it was a type of stone that had the quality of absorbing. In today's time, we have toilet tissue which has the same quality of absorbing. So what a person should try and do is not just suffice on water and also not just suffice on the toilet paper, but the and the best practice is to merge between the two. That a person will first use the toilet paper, thereafter a person will wash private parts, and then if the person wants to dry the private part after that, they can then use toilet tissue. So a person's objective is to get rid of all the traces of the najasa, of the impurity leaving the body from the front or back passages respectively. If a person uses toilet tissue only, then that would suffice if the traces of the najasa, of the impurities, are gone. So if a person perhaps pass stool and use toilet tissue and the smell and everything is gone, then that would be fine. But in most cases, toilet tissue does not work out that well and does not fulfill the objective. Sometimes it happens that you go to a public toilet and there's no jug that you can use to pour water and wash the private parts. What do you do in that instance? Some have advised that you can take a lump of toilet tissue if available, and you can just wet that and let it soak in the water. And when you want to wipe the private organ, you can sort of press the tissue, and the water will then be released from that lump of toilet tissue. So that's one way to achieve that. And sometimes it's always good to keep a bottle around for the purposes of istinja. If you know you're traveling, then at least keep an empty bottle or a bottle filled with water that you can use. If it's empty, you can always stop over at a gas station. You can fill water and you can use that when you go to the toilet. And another point about relieving oneself, it's very important to ensure that the toilet seat is clean, because sometimes you go to a public space, a public toilet, and this toilet seat is messed with urine that the person just that used it just before perhaps stood and urinated, and now there's droplets of urine, and now you are sitting on that same toilet seat, and all that urine and the impurities come onto your body. If you are to perform salah thereafter, it is going to be a problem. It may compromise the validity of your salah. So, what's the ideal is that whenever you go to a public toilet, take tissue and particularly wet tissue and wipe the toilet seat before using. And alhamdulillah, in today's times, we have disposable uh, toilet seat covers that you can get at your local pharmacy and so forth. That you try and get that. So, you know, if you're traveling somewhere, you're going overseas, wherever you're going in the airport or or you're in the shopping center and you need to use a toilet, you have that on hand where you can just put the disposable toilet cover over the toilet seat, and once you're seated on there, you know that there isn't that risk of impurities coming onto your body. So these are few things to keep in mind. Once a person completes the istinja and washes the private organs, it will also be necessary for a person to clean their hands. Obviously, you don't just relieve yourself, you wash the private organs and you leave the toilet. No, you wash your hands first and you wash it thoroughly to the extent that no traces of the impurities can be found on the hand, particularly the smell or the substance or the body of the substance itself should not be found of the impurities on the hands as well. So we clean our hands thoroughly, and once that is done, then we have successfully cleansed ourselves after having relieved ourselves. Inna Allah yuhibbul mutatahhirin. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who are clean and pure, and hygiene is something that is very, very important, and it is part of the natural disposition of human nature. It's a nature of human beings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the understanding. Let us try and pass this message over to others. Let us try and teach others as well. This is the beauty of Islam, cleanliness and hygiene. Barakallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, and inshallah we will see you in our next lesson. That will be next week. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. This is proudly being brought to you by Muslim Online.